Hi everybody, it's Joe Cioffi. It's a Sunday, and it's the end of our holiday weekend. And if you weren't on yesterday and you're joining me today, I hope you had a great holiday, a great Thanksgiving. And now we fast forward past Black Friday into Cyber Monday, and on into Christmas. And if you want to get your weather geek in your life a Joe Stradamus gift, be it a mug or a t-shirt or any one of a number of other things, you can check it out at the Joe Stradamus store. You can find the link to that on my website. Okay, so we've got a lot going on. I want to just kind of continue with the theme of yesterday when we were dealing with the blocking pattern that we're dealing with, and all the differences, and how the models don't seem to handle the blocking very well going forward, especially as we go into the longer range. There's all sorts of adjustments that we see from model run to model run, and that continues today. So, you know, this puzzle is far from being solved, but there are some interesting clues that are being offered. So we're going to take a look at what is going to be happening. The GFS and the European actually line up fairly well, and I want to start off with today's GFS model, and we're going to jump to day 7 on this. And here's how the upper air is going to set up along the lines of day 7 at this point. And actually, I think I might have pulled up the one a little bit further along. This is actually day 9. So let me just let me find day 7 here. Okay, I think it's this one. No, that's also day 9. You can see how organized I am. It's been a long weekend of fun and excitement, and eating away at all the leftovers. Yes, we are at. Let me just take a look. I'm sorry, folks. I just popped up a bunch of maps. Okay, so let me just get this straightened out here. Okay, so actually we actually are going to start off at day 9. Okay, which is next Monday. And here's your GFS look with this blocking ridge, trough off the East Coast, ridging that starts to pop up up the Appalachians, and a deep trough of very deep system that drops down into the southwest. And we also have energy that's coming down in the north. But the way the GFS takes this, the way it wants to take this, is it wants to really emphasize the position of the block, and the fact that it wants to really just fly that ridge up into the eastern part of the United States. And that is what it shows. At least that ridge, by the way, would be temporary, because ultimately I think the models do kind of wind up in the same general place. The GFS moves the system that's off the East Coast pretty much straight east, drives the trough southward down to about 30 north. That causes the ridge to fly up in the east, but it also handles the system out in the west a lot differently than the European does, with this strong trough in the plains that extends into the southwest. And then you start to get ridging to build up in the northwest. Here's your blocking ridge that's coming over the top, over Greenland, and pushing toward northeastern Canada. Okay, that is the GFS's idea. The European, however, sees it a little bit differently. And we'll show you the European now from today, which comes about this in an entirely different way. Let's pull up the European, and here we go. So we're going to put this up to the top. So here's the European's view. Now, where the European is different is significant. First off, it has a much deeper storm and trough off the East Coast here next Monday. The ridge is building, but it's taking a little bit longer to get there. You do get some ridging that starts to pop up in the east, but it takes the trough in the west and actually drops it southwestward. We also have a much stronger reflection of this system that's up in Canada that is swinging southeastward. So there's a bit of a separate jet that's developing here out of Canada. So when the European gets to the day 10 time frame, which is right here, I believe. Yep. So here's the European on the day 10 time frame. Has a much different look than the GFS. It has a pretty much a flat west to east flow, but it makes more of the system coming down out of Canada. So you create this separate jet here that comes down from the north. So overall, it would argue for a colder look. It also doesn't pop the ridge up for two reasons. One is it takes that system that's out west and actually drops it off the coast of Southern California. So that's one major difference with the GFS. And the trough that's out in the Atlantic is actually pinned further northwest. We have an upper low sitting in Nova Scotia instead of down along 40 North. And as a result, the heights here in the east are lower. So you have a colder look to it. The other thing that's happening, and I'm going to show you the ensembles today, because I think they are important. So we're going to take a look at the GFS ensembles. The ensembles have been really insistent on getting this trough into the eastern part of the United States. And the thing is, the European, the GFS, and even the Canadian ensembles are all kind of on the same page here. So it's sort of scary that all three are on the same page, because, you know, the cynic in me wants to say that they'll all be wrong. But let's give you the North America view, and then we'll pop up the upper air. And here we go. So there's your here's your GFS. Let's put the let's get the ensembles up there. So we'll start with the GFS ensembles. Now, as we move through time with this, of course, you're going to see that the upper air pattern becomes a broader. Okay, why is it not moving? It's being evil. For some reason, my ensembles are not loading. Let me try this again. Oh, now I know why. Okay, because the new ones are starting to come in. So let's get the new the 12Z ensemble. So here's the GFS ensembles, and we're going to move it. Now watch how what happens with the upper flow. Okay, so we are now at Tuesday. You can watch that block and how it changes over time. We're going into next weekend, so there's your trough in the east, and there's that troughing out in the west. Notice that the ridge in the east is pretty flat, and gradually, as we move through day 8, 9, 10, see that large increasing area of blue? That is below normal heights across the eastern part of the United States, and it just continues to stay right from day 8 all the way through day 16. And you can see the ridge that's out in the Atlantic that builds up toward Greenland over the top. So the GFS ensembles would certainly argue that we are going to go to this colder pattern after we get through this week. The Canadian ensembles, we'll look at those. And we're going to get to the same place with the Canadian ensembles to some degree, I believe. So let me get the gaps up. There we go. And we'll start from the beginning. And the Canadian ensembles, just taking a little time to load here. Canadian ensembles, you know, they have a little bit more of a ridge in the east, but it flattens out toward the end of the period. And then eventually you get that troughing in the eastern part of the United States, much like the GFS has, a little bit less strong with the block, but it still has that ridge up into Greenland. You still have troughing in the east. Now we can look at the European ensembles, and we're going to start those from the beginning. And here we have the European, you know, basically the same idea. with the, briefly a little bit of a ridge in the east, and then you start to get the trophic developing. Now, the European only goes out to 10 days, but if you, I did see the EPS be on the 10-day period, and it has the same idea as the other two models. So this, at least from the standpoint of when you see that uniformity, it gives you a certain sense of encouragement here. Trough that extends down from the eastern Aleutians down to Hawaii, ridge up along the west coast into western Canada, and a general trough that's going to start to develop in the eastern part of the United States. And there's your blocking signature that comes out of the Atlantic over up toward Greenland and into northeastern Canada. So this is going to be more of a west-based North Atlantic oscillation, more of a west-based block than the east-based block, which is what we have at the moment. We have the new GFS run, which, by the way, as I gave it a look earlier, we're out far enough, so it's trying to look a little bit more like the European. May not get there on this run, but we'll see. So here's that trough for late this week, so we'll get some rain coming into the east on Friday and across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley on Thursday. It still wants to take that system in the southwest, but this time around it only lifts part of it out instead of all of it out, and then eventually gets to this deep troughing in the eastern part of the U.S. as we go beyond the day 8, day 9 period. You still have that block. It's still up there. So we're still kind of in this sort of trying to figure it out mode as to where this is all going to go ultimately, but I think that the models are clear that we are headed in this direction, and that it's just it's going to take time. Pattern evolutions and pattern changes take time to happen. They are not singular events that happen in a single moment in time. So we are certainly going to have to be patient. For you snow lovers anyway, you're going to have to be patient as far as getting to where you want it to be. And you know what? We don't know for sure that it's ever going to get exactly the way you want it to be, but you deal with whatever cards that you're handed. Meanwhile, as we look at the current weather, the models are pretty clear with the idea of more rain that's going on out in the western part of the United States, and then that translates into some snow into the northern Rockies before it diminishes. Monday and Tuesday, except for the northwest, again pretty quiet. There's a weak front that approaches on Wednesday in the northeast that really doesn't have much of anything with it, and the weather across the U.S. is pretty quiet on Wednesday. But then we start to get that trough that's going to swing into the eastern part of the United States for the latter part of the week. You can see the rain, the showers that develop ahead of it. That moves into Friday. Now the models are showing a much less developed system in the east for late this week. It didn't go crazy with the trough like it did yesterday. All the models have backed off from that. That is something that we're still going to have to pay attention to, because that low is part of the catalyst that engineers the pattern switch. And then as we move through next weekend, you start to get that system out in the west that drops down toward the southwest, and you'll see that there's snow through Nevada, Utah, into Colorado and northern Arizona. High pressure in the east, but the GFS is going to want to take a storm up toward the western lakes with this, and if that's correct, and I don't know that it is, by the way, because the European says otherwise. You've got some snows that the GFS is trying to indicate for the central and northern central plains and the upper Midwest. But the low goes up to Lake Superior on this with the trailing cold front. So it really is after this that the models turn it colder in the east. And of course now we're at day 11 where we start to get into all the squirrely stuff that models like to do. But with that signature that we saw earlier on the upper air, it does turn it very cold into the eastern part of the United States around December 8th, December 9th, into December 10th. After that, it's sort of a who knows scenario. Snowfall, for those of you who want to look at how the GFS has it figured out, again, if there's going to be some kind of storm coming out of the southwest, which the European locks that thing up off the coast of Southern California, you're not going to have this look. But you can see it does produce some snow, a large area of snow extending all the way down into the southern Rockies, into New Mexico and parts of West Texas, and then on up through the Central Plains and up into the Western Lakes with some significant snows there. Not too much happening in the east, of course, through all of this. But again, this is all predicated on the fact that the GFS is right in bringing this system out in the west and then kicking it out to the east. That may not be the case. So we're going to probably see this map change quite a bit if the GFS has it wrong. In the meantime, with the east-based block, we are seeing some significant snows again being indicated throughout much of Europe, the British Isles, all of a good chunk of Western Europe getting significant snows down through much of Italy. This is a pretty, you don't often see snow all the way down to the bottom of the boot heel into Sicily, but it does show it there. So this is a pretty cold setup. And in fact, if you look at the upper air with this, you can see why. There's a big upper air storm sitting up in northern Germany, pretty far to the south. So your air is actually coming from Greenland southward across England into France and Italy and on through all of Eastern Europe. So this upper low, if this is correct, is really going to create some very cold conditions across much of Europe. And here's this is at day 10, but I'll back it up for you, and we can watch the evolution of the below normal temperatures across England and Ireland, and gradually spreading across all of Western Europe as that upper low drops in. A lot of that area either below or much below normal, especially the further south you go. So this is a pretty cold view here, and you get wave after wave of cold air. The one for the latter part of next week and into next weekend looks to be the coldest of the bunch, and then moving forward beyond day 10, it still stays very, very cold across much of Western Europe. So very interesting that the way that these things play out. You learn something new all the time with this sort of stuff, and for me anyway, this is a whole new adventure. In southeastern Canada, we'll give you folks for Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, because I know you're on board watching a lot of this, and we'll start for the time being. You get into some below average temperatures for excuse me, for this week. It's kind of cold in the studio I'm in. Let me shrink this down just a little bit so we can get see the date a bit better, and the geography a bit better as well. But this is for, here we go. Let me just get it up to, here we are to Thursday now, and you start to warm up in southeastern Canada, but then it kind of just gets normalized. Then as the changes happen across the U.S., you get to above normal temperatures that first week of December, and then after that it kind of stays above normal as we move through that first full week of December. So we're up to December 8th now, and then gradually you are going to see the temperature profile change with this once we get that trough in the east set up. And in terms of snowfall for you folks, you can see much of it across Labrador and Quebec. A little bit of snow as we look at Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. The western part of Newfoundland gets a bit more through the 10-day period. Why don't we take a look at what the actual forecast map is indicating, so you can watch your little storms go by there. Here's the first one for tomorrow that lifts up and out. Looks like some light flurry activity. Then as we move into Wednesday, you've got another system with a cold front with some rain and snow showers with that. And then we have a little bit of a low that moves south of Nova Scotia, but you're still getting a warm flow in from off the ocean. And here comes a low that comes up straight from the south off of Newfoundland as we move into the first full week of December. So we're now up to Monday night and Tuesday, December 5th and 6th. And it just rolls along from there. It's very interesting how these lows out in the Atlantic come up northwestward and then just sort of loop around. That's all in response to the upper low that is out there. So, much to ponder here. I got my picture here somewhere. There I go. It's hiding behind all those maps. So let's bring this up to the top. We don't have much in the way of short-range weather going on that we can really look at. At least in the eastern part of the U.S., it's just been so quiet, and we've got really 4 more quiet days going forward. So I'm going to check out you guys in the chat here right now and give you all a big hello. And thank you, those of you mentioning about my dog. I did talk about him yesterday. Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. So let's see. I just saw Chris Alley on and Cynthia Guignaudis. Hello to both of you, and hello to everybody else. Matthew, Delvin, Mike Zimmerman, 358 Bobcat NY. Thank you for the kind words. Yeah, nice haircut, MCG TV. I did get it all cut today. It was long overdue, although he kind of went a little bit short this time. Ruin Nation, I thought a blocking pattern would have cold air in the mid-Atlantic, well, at least from what I remember, and they are saying 60 for Tuesday. Ruin Nation, the position of the block is important, and if the block right now is what we refer to as east-based, in other words, it's more toward eastern Greenland eastward, okay, that is favorable to bring cold air down into Europe, which we're seeing. You would need that block to be further west. It has to be in West Greenland and pushing into northeastern Canada, because that's when it forces cold air much further to the south. So we're going to have to wait for that block to reposition itself, which all the models say is going to happen. It's just going to take a little bit more time for us to get there. Thank you, Cynthia. Really appreciate it. It's always tough. Those of you who have dogs and cats or whatever animals you have, it's a little difficult when you lose them after many years. And my dog was 14 years old. Just English Springer Spaniel. They only live till about usually 12 to 14. 14 is kind of the upper end. So he lived a good full life, but he was very sick over the last year or so, and it was really tough. Blind, deaf, little dementia. So it was time. He told me so Friday night that it was time to go, and I you have to do what you have to do. Let's see, Mike Zimmerman. Here's a saying: if December 4th ice and Christmas time going to be water. It's saying if December cold and late December will be mild. Well, Mike, I can probably pull dozens of examples where that's not the case. But usually those kind of sayings are from folks that have experienced that. Maybe it happened a couple of times in a row, so it becomes part of folklore. But I wouldn't necessarily hold that would be that's going to happen that way. Okay, I don't like to look at weather in that respect, because there's just way too many variables, and I've seen too many weird things happen over the years that have virtually busted every one of those kinds of sayings. I'm sure you've seen some teleconnections for cold coming in mid-December and the polar vortex shifting to Siberia. Do you think that the cold air will last through late December or just a week? Joseph Harcourt, whether it's temporary or permanent is really going to depend on, I think it's going to depend on how stubborn the blocking pattern / North Atlantic oscillation is. Sometimes it only lasts for a week or two. Sometimes it could last for several weeks or more. So we're really not going to know the answer to that question. It's hard for me to answer it because until we actually get into that pattern, you can't really evaluate its longevity. So let's get it set first, and then we can maybe look forward once we're in a 2 to 3 week time frame. East space, would it be even better if there was no block present or cold air another option? You don't need the block, Anthony. I think you make a good point here. The winters of 13, 14, and 14, 15 were 2 winters where we had very little blocking. You don't need blocking for it to get cold. You don't need blocking to have snowstorms. Now, you'd like, if you have the blocking, you could have a setup. You kind of need it if you wanted to see something that's of a blockbuster fashion, but you don't necessarily need it to get cold and snowy wintry pattern to set up, and to set up for a long period of time. 13-14, almost the entire winter saw very little blocking, and the cold was unrelenting because of the position of the vortex, which is kind of locked into the eastern part of of North America, and the cold air just kept coming one after another. And then in 14-15, it didn't set up until mid-January. The first part of the winter was actually was milder than average, but it was after the middle part of January that everything set up and stayed locked in till almost the end of March. So there are many ways that you can get a cold pattern. Let's see, Delvin. You're going back to that 14-15 for Boston. Correct. That was one where Boston and a lot of southern New England and actually all of New England got hammered, with some places getting record annual snowfalls being set. And Bobcat wants to get it cold enough to get the snow and the snow up in the Catskills and Wyndham, where they can at least make it. Yeah, it's going to take a little time. We got to get through this week because this week looks to be average to milder than average, depending on what days we're talking about. Going to warm up on Wednesday. It'll be cool on tomorrow into Tuesday, warm on Wednesday, cool on Thursday. But there's no real cold air in the eastern part of the United States, at least for the time being. And Cynthia, yeah, your first winter season with my live streams. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays, but we're going to follow it day to day for sure. Delvin, live streams this week, absolutely. The only day where I might have a problem is Wednesday, because I have a commitment, so I may have to live stream early. I may not even have time to live stream early in the day, but I'll try and figure out a way, especially if it looks pretty active. What I might wind up doing Wednesday of this week is live streaming Wednesday night late, so I might have to force you guys to stay up past 11 o'clock in order to see it. But Wednesday's going to be my tough day this week. Iron Mine 10, I don't have any idea. It's Tim from Long Island. A long range for the winter. As you know, those of you who follow me on Facebook know, and I've said this here many times, I'm not doing a seasonal forecast. I don't, I just can't get my head around it. It's too long a time frame, and I really don't have an opinion. I will say this. The number of above normal snowfall years on Long Island is kind of pushing the upper end of the envelope. So if we wind up with a subnormal year from a standpoint of snow, do not be surprised. Pandaz, thank you. Yes, I got my hair cut today. I was finally able to link up with the guy who cuts my hair, and he did his usual fantastic job. And I know you want snowstorms in Ohio. We got to get the pattern changed first, and then we'll see what we could do. Oh, thank you, John. You were watching from last year. The only difference is this year I'm going to be doing these live streams on a daily basis instead of pre-taping them. I'll have to pre-tape them when I can't do the live streams, obviously, but I will be doing more live streams this year than I did last year. Trish and Lou, you want a snowstorm in Wisconsin during the first week of December? I don't think you're going to see much this week. Let me just real fast review what's going on this week, because that first front. All right, my computer here is being a little slow for some reason. Oops. I hope I'm not going to lose you guys. I'm having a bit of a technical issue at the moment, so let's see if I can make my way out of it. Okay, I guess I'm still there. All right, let me try this again. All right, stay with me. I'm trying to pull up the GFS on a separate page here, and I'm having some difficulty, but my computer seems to be responding very, very slowly. I mean, I didn't think it really looked like you were going to get too much from this system here. Yeah, there really isn't anything of consequence for you this week up in Wisconsin. You really are going to have to wait until after the first 7 or 8 days of December in order to get the pattern cold enough to get even some snow off the lakes, depending on where you are. But for the time being, it doesn't really look like you're going to get much of anything at all for the next 7 or 8 days. Let's see. Thank you, Billy Johnson. I really appreciate it. Just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. And no, we're pretty much got everybody here. So, all right, folks, good. Let's call it a night, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll see what the models do during the overnight period. Hopefully that they'll have some sort of a clearer picture. They seldom do, and it probably won't. But we're always hoping. In the meantime, I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you had a great holiday. And we will see you tomorrow. By the way, if you go to the Joe Stradamus store and you type, there's a couple of discount codes that I have, and I can't remember. One of them is Cyber Monday, and the other one is Joe Stradamus. Cyber Monday is for the Angry Ben and the Angry Ben and the Jolly Joe Stradamus Christmas mugs, and the other one is for any general purchase. You get 20% off, I believe, for any order over $50. So you could get the link off my website if you're interested. And there's, again, don't feel obligated at all. I just put it out there. All right, folks, have a great Sunday. We will talk to you tomorrow.